Thank you very much, Dick, and I appreciate everybody who joined and is going to take a little bit of time with us. I just want to go over what's the agenda for today. It's going to be very simple. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is DevOps, just as level setting, and to make sure that we're all on the same page with respect to what do we mean when we talk about DevOps. And then the real focus of the talk today are some strategies that may help you to improve your DevOps culture. And that's where we're going to spend the majority of our time. 5 is just a nice number to use. There's no magic at the number 5. It could have been 3. It could have been 7. There are many different things that we can look at. I picked 5 in particular that I thought were worth sharing. And throughout, you should feel welcome to put questions into the Q&A box. And Valerie will be monitoring those, and and when we get to the end, if you have any questions or thoughts, I'll be happy to discuss them with you. So jumping right in, what do we mean when we talk about DevOps? Well, what we're talking about is the idea that you probably are already implementing some form of agile methodology for your development team. So on the left-hand side of this slide, we've got a development organization. Let's assume that they are actually implementing something that is agile. But in most of the organizations that we see today, there are still silos set up. So the development organization, they're agile. But what about your operations team? How are they functioning? They typically function in sort of a waterfall kind of methodology or mindset. And then finally, on the right-hand side, you've got your customer service organization, which may have no methodology at all, except to handle the calls as quickly as they can. And the result is you've got these 3 siloed organizations with different imperatives, different measures of success, and they are really kept separate from each other. And when we talk about DevOps, our fundamental goal here is to pull down those walls and allow these teams now to interoperate and really to work together towards the same ultimate goal, which is the success of our company, the success of our organization. And we want to do this, and primarily we're going to focus today on the cultural aspects of breaking down those silos. Now, when you've broken down the silos, we now have this continuous loop that we want dev and ops, and more we want security and support to be part of it. So whether you're in dev or whether you're in ops, you want to be involved in the planning at the upper left-hand side. You're going to be involved in the building. Now, these pieces, along with the continuous integration, tend to be the area that development spends most of their time focused on. But in a DevOps environment, we do this with operations. This is not a matter that development owns planning, development owns the build, development owns the continuous integration, that is to say the build and the test processes, and then they simply hand over code or finished product to ops to deploy and operate. We do this together, and we do it whether we're in dev or ops, wherever we are in the cycle, we're working on this together. And the key factor here is the continuous feedback that flows back into our cycle so that at each point along the way, we are getting better and improving. Now, DevOps comes into being around the idea of the rule of 3 or the 3 paths, and this really comes from Gene Kim's book, The Phoenix Project, which he in turn took from the goal written by Eliyahu Goldratt. And Gene Kim in the Phoenix Project, and then later in his DevOps Handbook, talks about the idea that there are 3 ways that we want to look at our processes. The first way is a left to right flow. It's the workflow. It's the way in which we move from requirements to development, test operations, and finally to support. We want this path, this flow, to be as fast as possible. We want to move from the left to the right with as little delay, as little friction as we possibly can. And what Gene Kim borrows from Eliyahu Goldratt is the idea that we should be focused on the constraints, the bottlenecks, those pieces that prevent us from moving quickly from left to right. So in this particular picture, we may have identified that our problem is that going from development and into test becomes a real problem area. Development simply cannot get their software perhaps built so that tests can't start running their tests on it. Or perhaps our bottleneck is the test, because they have not automated their tests, takes so long that they can't get it into the operations hands early enough that operations can really plan for and deploy our software in the kinds of time frames that we're looking for. Now, we're going to talk about some of the things that you can get out of it towards the end. But what we want to focus on here when we talk about DevOps is the idea that on the left to right path, we want to move as quickly as possible, and that means focusing on the bottlenecks. Now, once we're doing that and we've got a flow moving, we also need to think about the right to left. We need feedback, and we need that continuous feedback moving us from support all the way back to requirements, and so that we are catching our problems, we are taking advantage of our opportunities as early in the cycle as possible. As we all know, it costs a lot more to fix a problem when it's in production than it is when it's in development, or even if we can catch that as a potential problem spot in requirements. And we need to be thinking about these problems not only in terms of functionality, but in terms of the other kinds of operability issues, whether it's security or performance, reliability, and so on. All of these factor in to our right to left thinking. And we are going to get our best understanding of that if we involve support and operations early into our process. And that's one of the real things that underpins the idea of DevOps, is that whether you're in the requirements end or you're at the support end or anywhere in the middle, you have a role to play, and your role is not when it gets to your silo, but it's throughout the process. And so that gets us to our third path, our third way, which is continuous experimentation. And this really builds on the idea that you're already probably aware of when you think about Agile, is that we are continuously checking what are we doing, how can we do it better, what are the key learnings that we can take out of our current method of operation and improve so that that left to right and that right to left paths continuously get better. So that's our rule of three. Those are the three paths we want to be thinking about when we talk about DevOps. Now, let's make sure that we are in agreement about some of the things that DevOps is not. DevOps, first of all, is not simply a job title. You cannot go out and say, I'm going to hire the DevOps engineer, and now I am a DevOps organization. You can't simply change everybody's title and say, you are now a DevOps engineer, you are now a DevOps Q&A person, therefore we are now a DevOps organization. It is not a job title. Nor can it be mandated. That is to say, you cannot simply put out a memo to your organization saying that in the next 3 months we are going to be DevOps, make it so. DevOps, as we're going to talk about in detail when we get to the cultural section, is about a way of thinking. And you cannot mandate to people, you will now think differently. You need to bring a cultural change to your organization in order to make sure that you are successful in deploying your DevOps methodology. Now, DevOps is not all or nothing. And one of the mistakes that we make is when we think that if we are not DevOps across our entire organization throughout all of our products, then we have not succeeded. In fact, we would strongly urge you, if you are just thinking of getting into DevOps, to pick one area of your organization, a particular product, a particular component, some area that you have beginning to end isolation or componentization, or can be insulated from the requirements all the way through the operations, and focus on getting them DevOps. Use that as your proof, if your proof of concept, so that you can show how it works, and so that you can learn by making your mistakes in a small isolated area. Trying to do this as a big bang, all or nothing kind of shot is asking for failure. It's asking people to be unhappy. Now, DevOps is not simply a matter of saying, well, I'm agile, so I must, if I just call myself DevOps, I must be DevOps, or saying to my operations organization, hey, the development organization is agile, you guys be agile and we'll be DevOps. It doesn't work that way. Agile is critically important to being successful at DevOps, but it is not, DevOps is not simply a matter of being agile. It's quite a bit more than that. Another thing that DevOps is not is speed over quality and security. It is we want and we are looking to accomplish increased velocity and reduced lead times in getting our development into production. But we are not going to do that by sacrificing quality and security. On the contrary, what we're really focused on is building in quality and security at every step along the way. And so DevOps puts a premium on doing it right as opposed to doing it fast. But if we do it right, we're also going to start to do it fast. Now, one of the things I hear over and over again as we talk to people, particularly in the middle level, that first line manager, that second line manager area within larger organizations is, DevOps is a threat to my job. Or purists will say, there's no need for managers because we are dealing with self-organized, self-directed teams. And there could be nothing further from the truth. And I've had these arguments with purists before. Management, as we will see when we get into the cultural section, management continues to be a critical part of the DevOps culture. The issue is not whether or not we need managers, but the kind of management that we need to enable DevOps. It's more than about tools. Now, as Dick said, we are an Atlassian shop. In addition to the BMC side, my focus is on the Atlassian implementation. And I will tell you, I don't think there's any organization or any vendor that is better positioned to support DevOps than Atlassian. But I will also tell you that you cannot simply go out and buy a bunch of Atlassian tools, Jira and Confluence and Bitbucket and Bamboo, and now you're DevOps. It is not that easy. And in fact, if you haven't got the culture right, the tools will only get you so far. In addition, it's not simply about the code. It's not simply a matter of we're going to focus on the code and then we're done. If we get the code right, if we have peer reviews, if we have a good source code repository, that is a requirement. It is not sufficient for DevOps. So let's go ahead. That's sort of the DevOps piece of it, but let's go ahead and talk about some strategies, some things that I think you can use. Let's think perhaps of hacks that you could start to implement that might help you to implement or to improve your DevOps culture. And as I said, the very first and fundamental underpinning of a successful DevOps organization is a cultural one, is one where you are thinking in a DevOps way. So the first strategy I'm going to talk about is to check in with your customers. And then we're going to talk about trusting your team and how you might be able to do that. We're going to talk about the need to continuously generate fresh ideas. I want to talk about the importance of letting the data drive you. And then finally, we're going to talk about something that's so difficult for many organizations, learning to love the change. And that is really fundamental, I think, to DevOps. So let's dive right in and start talking about the first one. The first one is the idea of checking in with your customers. Now, as Dick will tell you, my brother wrote a book. He's a management consultant, and he likes to talk about right-side-up thinking. And what he says is that right-side-up thinking is putting your customer at the center of your planning, at the center of your approach, that you are thinking about your customer and not simply your own organization. And so for this cultural hack, we're going to ask you to check in with your customers. How will you do that? Well, we're going to suggest to you that you're going to create a small interview, and you are not going to do this as a SurveyMonkey tool that you simply send out and hope that you get a 10% response. I want you to really think about a small group of customers that are important to your organization and to whom you are an important vendor, that you're an important provider. And those customers don't have to be external customers. They may be the internal customers for your organization as well. But I want you to think about who are those customers. And then I want you to put together a questionnaire, a set of questions that will help you to identify with them what they think you do right and where they think you could improve, both in terms of your product or the service you're delivering to them, and also in terms of your interpersonal, the way you are delivering that product or service. What makes you valuable to them, and what things could you do that would increase your value to that customer? So once you've thought about it that way, you're going to have a small team and you're going to start to make appointments, whether ideal would be in person to actually go to your customer site, sit with them for an hour or even 2 hours and really do this in-depth interview. If you can't do that, doing a phone call or a video chat is certainly acceptable, but in person is really ideal. Your team, your interview team, should consist of no less than 2 people, and ideally 3 people is the right number. One person is a person who's going to ask the questions. Their job is to raise the questions, perhaps to follow up on answers that they hear, to really be engaged, but to understand not just what question am I asking, but why am I asking that question. Your second person is a scribe. That's the person who's going to take all the notes. Your interviewer should not be taking the notes. That should be done by your scribe. And finally, if you can have a third person, that person would be an observer. That person should not ask questions. That person should not take notes, except maybe jotting down a quick observation. But that person's job is to catch the nonverbal cues. Who does all the talking? Who doesn't do the talking? Is the person who's not doing the talking really the influencer who's simply looking to see how everybody else does? Do you see visual signs that you've asked a difficult question or that you've asked one that really resonates with their team? Is there something perhaps that went left unsaid? That's what your observer's job is. So if you find the right customer and you develop your script, you go in with 2 or 3 people and you sit and you really ask them, why am I a valuable provider to you, and what can I do better? You will start to have that right side up thinking. You will start to be able to put in place new ideas and new approaches that are going to improve your performance, and they will lead to greater success. And this really is, again, as I say, part of that DevOps thinking. Start with the customer in mind. Don't start with your own team in mind, but start where it really belongs. Now, when we talk about the team, and this really gets to this idea of management, what's the role of management within DevOps? Are you a manager on the left-hand side of this visual who basically is there to tell everybody what to do, which piece to pick up, where it should be fit, who's responsible for what? Are you a top-down manager? Or are you more on the right-hand side? Are you a manager who is enabling your team to come together? Are you what we call in Agile and in DevOps a servant leader? And that's a really important distinction. The role of the left-hand manager, the top-down manager, goes away. And so those are the people who are most threatened by DevOps. It's that those who see their management style as being the ones, the decision makers, they are going to be threatened in a DevOps environment. But if you start to see yourself not as the decision maker, but as the leader and the one who is responsible for clearing away the obstacles, you set the expectations, you bring from the top, from your management down, what are our goals, what are we being expected to accomplish, and then enabling your team to do that, you will build a DevOps culture that will be a successful one. So what are some of the things that you need to do as a manager to be successful? I pulled this out of the Puppet DevOps report. and which did a really nice job, I think, of encapsulating what it means to be a servant leader in a DevOps environment. It means stimulating your team. Your team is made up of creative, smart people who want to do a good job. And if that doesn't describe your people, then you need to start thinking about how do you inspire them to become those kinds of people. And that's where the inspirational communication comes in. It means being able to show them not only the stake that they have in the company, but the stake they have in themselves and as being members of this team to really deliver on the commitments that the team as a team has made. It means supporting your organization. It means clearing away the roadblocks. It means seeing your job as the servant leader to be the one who makes it possible for everybody to succeed. As opposed to telling them how to succeed, it's clearing away those things that are preventing them from succeeding. It's giving personal recognition because, and this is where I really disagree with the purists who say self-organizing teams don't need managers. Well, we are dealing with individuals, and each person has their own personal needs and their own personal way to be motivated. And a manager's job is to be thinking about those kinds of things. It's not to be thinking about how to solve the technical problem, though that can be a valuable part. But the real job of a manager or a servant leader is thinking about how do I get the most, how do I help my people get the most out of themselves? And it's articulating the vision of the organization, the vision of the team. It's being that leader. So that is my step number 2, if you will, which is being a transformational servant leader will help to build a culture within your team that I think you will find goes far beyond simply the basic teamwork and into a real high-performance team. The third hack that I want to recommend to you is generating fresh ideas. And one of the things that we find people forget about is that they get into a standard way of operating. And even if they're having their regular retrospectives, even if they're having their regular release postmortems and talking about what went well and what didn't go well, we sometimes start to focus on our own, the trees in front of us as opposed to the entire forest. And people get very stuck in their siloed ways of thinking. I recommend that at least once a quarter, maybe every 2 months, you set aside a half a day or a full day and you get your team, everybody from development requirements all the way out to support, and you get them together to do a brainstorming team exercise that is not focused on the retrospective and the post-mortem kinds of discussions, which are what do we do well and how can we do it better, but what can we do completely differently? What are some brand new ideas? And we can pick a theme. We put everybody in a room and we pick a theme and we say, today we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you make up some examples. How do we get customers to put more than one item in their cart? What we see from marketing is that most of our customers only buy one thing at a time. How could we get them to buy 2 or 3 things at a time? So what we want to do is, and now what we'll do is we'll start brainstorming. And there are lots of brainstorming techniques that I'm not going to get into here, but we can get our folks to start thinking not just about their own job, but broadly about what it is that they are involved in doing. And from this, we're going to generate ideas. And these ideas may be useful. Sometimes they're going to be dead on arrival. That's okay. What we want people to do is to think creatively. And by giving them an opportunity to do that outside of their regular job function, you will increase the creativity that they demonstrate within their job function. So that's step number 3, or cultural idea number 3. Number 4, DevOps and Agile is all about letting the data drive you. It's about making sure that you are making decisions that are based upon real data and not based simply upon subjective gut instinct. Because, frankly, our gut instinct is bad. It is generally not correct. And therefore, we need to back that up with data. Now, when I talk about data, I'm talking about things that we can measure, and that's really important, is the things, for instance, the time to mean time to recover from a failure, the number of failures, how quickly we can, what are our lead times on putting out new features, and so on. But let's be careful of the fallacy that the only things that count are the things that you can measure easily. So we want to be thinking about what are some of the other things that we are important to us, but aren't as easy to measure, and then how do we start to measure them? For instance, it may be that we have a low-performing team, and we think it's because we have low morale, because people are feeling burned out, because people are feeling overworked, because people feel that they don't know what's expected of them. It may be any number of these things that we suspect are the cause of the problem. Now let's go out and figure out how do we measure those things. So let's not simply focus on the things we can measure easily, but let's measure the things that are truly important. And that means thinking carefully about what is important, and then how do we figure out what the baseline is and what our goals should be. Now, I had promised you I'd give you some idea of things that you might be able both to measure and the kinds of improvements you might be able to get if you become a high-performing DevOps team. This, again, also comes from Puppet's 2017 State of DevOps report. And this measures essentially the difference between high-performing DevOps teams and teams that are at the bottom end of the DevOps adoption cycle. They may just be starting out, or they just simply may not be doing a very good job of it. And what they found, and this is this 2017 statistics, is that the difference between the low and the high, excuse me, is the high-performing teams are 5 times fewer change failure rate. That is to say, they are 5 times less likely to have a failure caused when they implement a change into their environment. And when they do have a failure in their production environment, they are 96 times faster to roll that out and put back the stable release. So they have 96 times faster to recover from failures. Their lead time, and that is the time it takes to go from initial requirement to production, is 440 times shorter. And what that really means is that a high-performing DevOps team is thinking not in terms of monthly or quarterly or semi-annual releases. They are thinking of releases in hours or days. And the way they are accomplishing that is both cultural and tools-based. And I'd be happy to get into that in more detail, but what's really important is that we can now start to think, marketing can say, I would like to do an A/B test to test out a new idea that I've got for our web page, and a developer can turn that out and put it into production with high confidence in hours, instead of in days or months, or saying we will build that into our next quarterly release. It means that a customer requirement could come in and actually be turned back to the customer in a week, fully tested, and with all the builds automated. That's what that 440 times shorter lead time means. And then the 46 times more frequent deployments, because we can move so quickly through our cycle, requirements all the way through to deployment and operations, we can deploy 46 times more often than we used to. Instead of thinking about a quarterly release, we simply release as things become available. And so you see high-performing teams deploying 46 times more often than the low-end teams. Those are real data points, and you can measure those data points. You can decide which of those data points is important to your organization and start to talk about how can we achieve them. And this is an example. One of the questions I like to ask some of our clients is, do you have a wallboard where everybody who's involved can quickly look and see how are we doing on the metrics that we are using to measure our success? Are we doing better? Are we doing worse? Is there a blip? Is there a red flag that we need to be aware of? And is this available not on demand, but in front of everybody all the time, so that all they have to do is glance up and know where the organization, where their team stands in terms of meeting their commitments? This helps promote data-driven behavior. It helps to promote the idea that we are not simply working on gut and feel, but we are actually working towards measurable goals. Last idea is learning to love the change. Some of us love roller coasters, and other of us would love to have that lazy ride down the river in a nice, comfortable inner tube. But the fact of the matter is, no matter which one we are taking, we are moving. We are constantly evolving. And we need to be able to adapt quickly. And in order to do that, we need to ask, what's in it for us? That is so important to your teams, that they understand what's in it for them to adopt the changes that you're asking of them. So what does development get? Well, development is going to start to see they can move their code from their own laptop to production so much faster. And for most developers that I know, that's a big incentive, because we love to see things get into production. We're going to dramatically reduce our lead times. We're going to be able to see what we do quickly. We're going to automate that. We are going to make it so much easier because we don't have to manually test and build and deploy. We're going to be able to focus on our coding and getting that done. We're going to deploy more often, which means I can see more of my work get out there to my customers faster with greater confidence. I'm going to make those faster and easier because I've automated them. Now, what's in it for operations? Well, operations doesn't want to work hair on fire, putting out the last critical problem that just came up and it was 2 in the morning. They want their systems to remain up. And they want to be able to meet or be able to start to meet SLAs. And how many of my customers, frankly, don't have SLAs at all because they either can't measure them, or because they knew even if we could measure them, we couldn't meet them with any confidence because of all of our unplanned downtime. We're going to reduce that failure rate. As an operations person, I'm going to deploy with much more confidence because I know that what gets to me, by the time I'm asked to deploy it, it's been thoroughly tested in an environment that matches what I'm being asked to deploy it on. And my mean time to recover is going to be so much faster and I am no longer going to have calls from irate VPs or irate customers asking when is the system going to be back up, because I know I'm going to be able to roll back to a stable version much, much more quickly with much greater confidence. So what are the key points that I've talked about? And I want you to be thinking about your comments or your questions as I go through. This is my last slide. No silos. We're breaking down those silos. We are no longer thinking that dev is on one side of the campus and operations is on the other, and they don't talk to each other. We are breaking down silos and getting everybody to communicate. We are customer focused. We are thinking about putting the customer up front in everything we think about and how we do our work. We are empowering our teams. We are servant leaders, helping our DevOps teams to become as efficient and as successful as we can in our management role. Excuse me. Collaboration and information sharing. We want to make sure that everybody knows everything they need to know. And that means putting the information out there and letting everybody pull what they need, as opposed to telling people you don't need to know this, or I will let you know if I think you need to know it. We're going to build in quality. We're going to not add it later. We're going to make it part of the way we do business at each point along the way. We are going to continuously learn. We are going to keep asking the question, what can we do better? And what things are we doing well that should not be broken? And finally, DevOps is about the value. It's about delivering value to our customers and to our organization. And it's a mindset that says we are in this together. This is not about me delivering value and you getting to ride on my coattails or vice versa. This is about us succeeding or having an opportunity to succeed together. And that really underlies the culture of DevOps, is that whether you're in development, operations, security, or support, we are all part of the same team pulling to the same goals and having each other's back, trusting that we are going to get this done together. So those are the points that I wanted to raise. As I said, there are lots more things we could talk about on culture. We could talk about process and tools, but that's really all the time that I've got for today. Here's some ways to contact us. I'm going to leave this up and see if Valerie has any questions for me to address.
Hey, Derek?
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent job. I really enjoyed that. I love your analogy of the lazy river versus the roller coaster. So those of you out there, you can think, am I a lazy river or am I on a roller coaster? So maybe there's a happy medium somewhere. While we're waiting for some questions to come in, or some more questions to come in, let me ask you something that happens to me all the time. I may go out, I might be on a sales call, I might be talking to somebody at a show, and I'll mention DevOps, and maybe I start to sell a little bit, and the first thing I hear is, and this may be a smaller organization, is say, oh, well, we don't really do much software development anymore. Maybe a little bit on the website. That's about it. We try to outsource everything, or we're moving to the cloud, or we're going into all SaaS-based operations. So we don't need any of that. But I think those types of answers, and especially those types of organizations, really miss the point of DevOps, because it doesn't matter what size you are. I mean, it's the whole culture, it's the principles around DevOps, because everybody needs to work in a team, no matter how small you are. Would you agree? And maybe you could, even if you're going to roll out an off-the-shelf solution, you're still going to have to manage that, and there may be more customization or development work required than you would have expected. So you still have to get your act together around DevOps. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, I 100% agree with that. And as you said, it's a mindset, it's culture. Now, certainly DevOps focuses on organizations that have a software focus or a software bent. But almost every organization is a software organization someplace along the way. I mean, you have to have software to run your business. And that means whether it's your vendors helping to roll it out and you are a part of that team, or you're doing it yourself, you are still running a software organization. But it's more than that. I think that whether you're in legal or you're in HR or you're in accounting or you're in marketing, you need to be thinking along the lines of there is a process, there's a value chain that I am going through to deliver something, because ultimately we are delivering something to our customers, and we are all part of that delivery, that value chain. So where am I in the value chain? What are the things that make it hard for me to do my job, or that I do that I could make it easier for the guy who's downstream of my part of the value chain? That's all part of our DevOps thinking.
I certainly agree with that. Here's a question that just came in. It says here that you said that we should measure what matters, but how do we know what really matters? And I guess you put up some charts, and I think there's probably some metrics and maybe there's some benchmarking. But what do you, if you're just getting started, what do you do?
Well, I think that you have to look at your organization, and you have to. What matters is going to be different for each organization, and I think that what are the primary pain points? What are the indications that you could be doing better? It could be focused, like it takes us too long to put out a release. Our releases have too many bugs. Our customers, we have too many incidents that we have to handle, all for the same problem. And it's driving our support people crazy. And it could be any number of things like that. Or it could be larger problems. As I said, it could be that our customers, we have too many customers coming to our website and leaving without actually interacting or purchasing, if you're doing some kind of online retail. I think you know what is holding your organization back, or what are the indicators of your organization's success. And that's where you're going to dig into those things. And you're going to start to break them down to what are the constraints? What are the parts of my value chain that seem to be holding me back? And start to focus on how do I improve those? So how do I measure them? How do I improve them so I know that I'm getting better? And as you start to alleviate those bottlenecks, new ones are going to show up. You're going to see the next one that shows up. So you're not going to run out of things to do, but you do need to prioritize by focusing on which is the biggest bottleneck, which is the thing that seems to be standing in your way, and that is somewhat subjective. But once you've made the subjective determination, start thinking about how do I measure? How do I know where I am and so that I know whether I'm getting better?
Okay, thank you. I had one other thing I just wanted to ask you about, and as you know, we mentioned that we are an Atlassian solution provider, and we're responsible for helping to roll out and implement the entire Atlassian suite, which could consist of Jira and Confluence and so on. And one of the things that I think is kind of amazing, Atlassian is a rapidly growing company, but what they don't have is a huge number of salespeople. It's a lot of credit card swipes. Atlassian uses a lot of partners like RightStar to get the word out, and yet they're competing against some of the biggest software companies in the world, like IBM, CA, Microsoft, and they're winning. I have a friend who's an IT executive at Capital One, and they just standardized on Jira. They have, I think, around 5,000 developers. I mean, I think it's just incredible what some of these large banks are doing from a software perspective. So here they standardized on a product. They certainly didn't have a lot of enterprise sales reps banging their door down, yet they decided that Jira was the way to go. Can you comment at all? Is your experience, is that what you think is going to continue to happen? Is that Atlassian is going to continue to win against some of the bigger players out there because of the strength of their tool set?
Well, I think that they have a brilliant sales model. I think they're a great company, and they do things the right way. Their model really is we're going to build the software. We're going to build the best software we possibly can, and we're going to let it sell itself. So they make it available. You can put the entire Atlassian suite on your own server on your desktop for about $60 total. That's a one-time, you pay it and you're done, and you can put the whole thing on. Now, that only gets you so far. Typically, it gets you 10 users or 3 agents and so on. But you can try it as a skunkworks, and this is where they've been really successful, is that a developer comes in who says either I've used Jira before, I heard about this great tool, for $10 I can put it onto my machine and I can run it. So this has been a brilliant sales model. And then what they've done is they said, instead of us spending a lot of money going out and selling it, let's work with partners like RightStar, who have both the contacts and who have the local presence to work with the larger customers, more of the enterprise type customers, to actually do the implementation. Because frankly, what you get out of the box from Jira is fine, but I don't know any organization of any size or complexity that can live simply with what's out of the box. They really need it to be customized. And so Atlassian focuses on building the best possible product they can. Lots of open interfaces, lots of ecosystem partners, that build add-ons, and lots of partners like RightStar that come along and do the services. I think they do a great job. I hate to prognosticate, Dick, as to whether or not that's going to hold forever, but I think they do a fabulous job. I think they are a company that is run the right way by great, really good people.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Derek. I think that pretty much takes us to the end here. I wanted to thank everybody that's out there for your time and attendance today. As you can see, if you look up on the Contact RightStar page here, you can see different ways to get in touch with us, either phone or by email, and we'd love to talk to you a little bit more, maybe about some issues that you're facing in terms of developing software faster, working better with teams. Maybe you'd like to see a demo of Jira, or maybe you just want to talk to us. Maybe you've got some ideas. We'd be happy to spend some time with you. So we certainly appreciate your time. We do these things on a regular basis as well, so I hope that you can join us the next time we have one. And as I mentioned when we started today, we are giving away the Art of Business Value, and if we're so lucky to win, you'll get an email shortly after this webinar. We'll do a random drawing, and then you should see the book show up, and if you wanted to give us your mailing address, we can get that book out to you in a very quick amount of time. So thanks, everybody, again, for attending. We certainly appreciate your time today. So I'm going to sign off from RightStar. I hope everybody has a good rest of the afternoon.